Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to the Film Stories podcast. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined right at the start by Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's decided to leave his own personal review of the podcast and deliver it in person.
It's impossible, it's not natural, and I'm not interested.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew, but as always, that's absolutely everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast, though, is given away in the title. I'm here to talk of the stories of films, and I tend to talk about production stories, development stories, release stories, marketing stories, all the ingredients, really, that go towards making the films that we know and sometimes love. Just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. The films I tend to cover on this podcast, they lean more towards the mainstream than anything else. They're films I'm interested in or invested in to some degree. I try really hard not to do snark. I try really hard not to punch down. This podcast is a celebration of cinema and a real appreciation of just how difficult it is to get a movie onto the big screen. And that is enough preamble. Well, let me play you a clip from the trailer and I'll come to the story of this particular movie, the other side of this.
I took you for a scientist.
I'm a scientist.
Yeah? Well, where's your vision? Opportunity's knocking here.
You're just trying to manipulate me.
Yes, I am. So what? We're on the verge of something fantastic, and I need you to carry it through with me.
What's going on?
Can you keep an open mind? I mean, really wide open?
Let's put a bun in your oven.
I must be crazy to be doing this.
You may be crazy, but you're also pregnant.
I'm pregnant. I just can't keep anything down.
It's morning sickness. It'll pass. Eat crackers.
Alex is sweating like a racehorse.
What's going on?
Everything's perfectly normal, except for the fact that the mom is also the dad.
Yoo-hoo!
She looks so beautiful tonight.
You look sort of glowing.
Yes, you do. You look positively lit up. What's the good news?
No good news. If this gets out, your life is over.
My nipples are very sensitive.
What?
Does my body disgust you?
No.
You're kissing? Wait a minute, Alex. You're in no condition to start a relationship.
I want you to know everything about me. I'm pregnant.
And a big congratulations. That is 1994's Junior, directed by Ivan Reitman, script credited to Kevin Wade and Chris Conrad, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Danny DeVito, Emma Thompson, Frank Langella and Pamela Reed. So let's kick this one off by just acknowledging 1988's movie Twins, which again I've covered before on this podcast, but that was the film where Arnold Schwarzenegger suddenly broke through as the new force in Hollywood comedy. Very unlikely idea, but the putting together of director Ivan Reitman and then Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito for the film Twins turned into box office gold. Now, it wasn't a project that people were particularly confident about when it was greenlit. Universal, for instance, struck a deal whereby DeVito, Schwarzenegger and Reitman would take very low upfront salaries and instead would take a slice of the profits, which would make all three of them incredibly rich. Schwarzenegger himself would then quickly capitalise this, moving on to the film Kindergarten Cop, and this suddenly became a trend of looking to cast big beefy action stars against type. There was a while where City Slickers director Ron Underwood, for instance, was being linked with the film Tooth Fairy, and the idea there, Schwarzenegger as the Tooth Fairy. Terrible idea that ultimately would come to fruition with Dwayne Johnson in the lead role and be a terrible idea. But in 1990, a pair of writers by the name of Kevin Wade and Chris Conrad had a different plan, because they'd had experience of what's called Jungian therapy based on work by Carl Jung. Now, Psychology Today, I had to look this up, defines Jungian therapy as fundamentally a talk therapy and includes exploring sometimes unpleasant parts of your mind or painful previous experiences. And as was explained in a piece penned for the Huffington Post, we'd both been in Jungian therapy and were searching for a way to reconcile the antagonism between the yin and the yang, a favourite Jungian question. They know more about this than me. But they declared a good theme for a movie, and then it struck us. If men could have babies, the wall would come crashing down. And that was their starting point. They threw themselves into research. They started looking up science. They tried to find anything that could really put the tale into some kind of context whereby they could make it believable to the audience, a big mainstream audience, and also tell the tale that they wanted to. And so, I mean, beautifully, it took around 9 months to get the script done. I mean, you couldn't make that up, could you? And then it went out to Hollywood agents, and it's just the kind of high concept thing that was selling at that point. However, what it required was a relatively big name actor willing to go on screen and, I mean, there's no way around this, give birth. And there were not a lot of macho big name actors who were particularly interested in being pregnant and giving birth in a big Hollywood movie. Now, I should note that I dug out a copy of Premiere magazine, the American Premiere magazine. I've got it right in front of me here, where there's an extensive junior set report from its December 1994 issue. And in there, it gives me the news that Sondra Locke was briefly attached as a director. I don't quite know where, but I will throw that piece of news just in there. However, the project, first of all, in terms of casting, went out to Mel Gibson. He was the person who came closest to signing up, first of all. And he was interested in it. And at this point, he was a big star. And so he just decided, before signing on the dotted line, to run it by his church first. And it was allegedly, his church who advised him it was an unnatural act, a man giving birth, and he shouldn't take part in the movie. Now, this was around the time that I think he was just about to embark on Lethal Weapon 3, where he was shooting people, but that is a natural act, and that seems to be a little more settled. Woody Harrelson expressed interest as well, but Woody Harrelson in the early 1990s didn't quite have the clout to get such a high concept idea off the ground. It wouldn't be an instantly funny poster to have Woody Harrelson as a pregnant man, whereas it would had it gone to someone like Mel Gibson, who had an image that was far more cemented in the public eye at that point that he could play against. Then a call came in from a legend of Hollywood agents, Sue Menger, and she had apparently the perfect answer. Comedian Andrew Dice Clay would do it. Now, there was a meeting that took place, and he would certainly be playing against type, but the meeting didn't go particularly well. That Andrew Dice Clay apparently saw the idea of the film, which was currently called Oh Baby, as more of a revenge movie, and the writers bluntly didn't. As they wrote, the purpose of this movie was to make a positive statement of men being able to get in touch with their feminine side. This casting challenge was being played out in the landscape that gave us O.J. Simpson. I knew it would take a very secure man to do this role. Then I actually dreamed of Arnold. That Arnold would be Arnold Schwarzenegger, but would he do it? Well, at this point, he'd come off the back of Total Recall. We're at the start of the 1990s, and he was immersed in his next project, Kindergarten Cop, the reunion of he and Ivan Reitman, although not Danny DeVito for that one. And so this was Schwarzenegger's second comedy, and it was while they were making that the script for Oh Baby made it to him, and he showed it to Ivan Reitman. Now, Schwarzenegger had his plate full. He had to finish Kindergarten Cop and then move on to Terminator 2 for James Cameron. Then he would, after that, slot in Last Action Hero, a film that would no doubt cement him as the biggest movie star in the world, and I like Last Action Hero. But the Schwarzenegger was interested, and he showed it to his wife at the time, Maria Shriver. She was very interested as well. And so there was the chance, really, that he was going to make this his next comedy movie. Now, Ivan Reitman, as a director, was, according to Schwarzenegger's memoir, Total Recall, convinced to do the film when he saw a video of Schwarzenegger pretending to do a LeMay's parenting class. I don't know what they are. I did look them up, but I could give you a long explanation, but it would take time, wouldn't it? Schwarzenegger's wife loved this idea, and it was a baby shower for one of their children that Reitman saw this video, or Schwarzenegger filmed this impression of a parenting class that Reitman subsequently saw, and Reitman just thought, well, actually, he might be able to carry it off. So we move forward to May of 1992. That Reitman had finished Kindergarten Cop and Ghostbusters 2 that had come out around the same time. He was moving on to a film called Dave next. But in 92, it was known that Schwarzenegger and Ivan Reitman were now on board together to make the film Oh Baby. Variety reported this. Now, at this stage, Alice Arlen, co-writer of the film Silkwood with Nora Ephron, was said to be working on the screenplay, although she's nowhere to be found in the final credits. So again, not entirely entirely sure what happened there. Reitman, in the same news article that reported he was working with Schwarzenegger on this, was also reported to be working with Danny DeVito on a different project. Now, that was a film called Prague that was being penned by someone called Lem Dobbs. He was also working on a new version of The Day the Earth Stood Still, and Prague ultimately never happened. But the idea of another Arnold Schwarzenegger comedy playing against type, well, that was looking like it was going to happen, and Universal was quite happy to take it again, as it had done with Twins and Kindergarten Cop, joined very quickly. And then with Reitman and Schwarzenegger signed up, well, when Prague fell apart, the movie Prague fell apart, Danny DeVito wouldn't be far behind. Now, DeVito had skipped Kindergarten Cop because he was directing a movie of his own. That would be Hoffa, starring Jack Nicholson. But there was a feeling between Reitman and Schwarzenegger in particular on Kindergarten Cop that they got that one slightly wrong. It should have been a bigger hit, but if you're unfamiliar with the movie, it starts and ends with a lot of violence. I mean, if you cut the first 10 minutes out of Kindergarten Cop and just put it in front of any other Schwarzenegger action movie, it would fit in pretty much. And so they were wary that they had to get the tone a lot better. But still, they hadn't ultimately all committed to this specific film, no matter how it had turned up in the trade press. And it was in the spring of 1993 when Reitman was at the premiere of his film Dave, starring Kevin Kline and Sigourney Weaver, that DeVito, Reitman and Schwarzenegger signed a napkin declaring we will all work together in March 1994, that they had space in their schedule at that point, and they knew that these films didn't take long to actually shoot, and so they were committed to, they were going to do something. They just didn't quite know what it was going to be. However, amongst the candidates, Junior was about the most advanced, and so it came to pass that that was the one that they came together on. Now, Reitman would accelerate development after the signing of the napkin, and he would alter the film. There would be some rewriting work done that would add a second male lead character. Basically, the script that had been penned was reshaped to accommodate a character for Danny DeVito, and then DeVito was in. It got to the point that it was moving that fast that in February 1994, Emma Thompson agreed to take the female lead role in the film. She had been linked with a role in Dave for Ivan Reitman as well, but here she was signing on the dotted line. The film could go ahead in March of 1994. It was now called Junior. It looked like it was full steam ahead. And in fact, it was $60 million budget this time, Universal not giving anywhere near as much of the back end away, thus it had to pay more up front. And in March 1994, it had taken 13 script revisions to get actors around a table for the first table read of the script. The new revisions were still coming in, and it was quite interesting reading the set report in premiere that tonally the actors were in slightly different places, that DeVito and Thompson were very confident and more comfortable with the comedy that they were doing at that table read. For Schwarzenegger, this was a slightly more difficult role to nail. I mean, how ultimately do you play it? And he was slightly more quiet. Still, filming began April the 4th, 1994, but Schwarzenegger's schedule was a crammed one because he was just coming off by a matter of days James Cameron's film True Lies, and in fact he was still doing bits and bobs of True Lies whilst Junior was shooting, that he was having to alternate and go backwards and forwards a little bit, certainly during the prep as well. And so, I mean, the roles couldn't be a lot more different, and it led Ivan Reitman to lament to premiere that the week before filming commenced on Junior, Schwarzenegger was skiing for James Cameron. And so it would continue just for a little while. Arnold Schwarzenegger would come to the set of Junior, he'd put on his baby belly, and then he'd go off to do some scenes in a Harrier jump jet, and he managed not to get these two things confused. Interestingly, in the premiere report as well, and a lot of these premiere set report visits, I mean, they went for 10, 12 pages. I missed them a lot, and they put a lot of stuff out there that isn't on the internet. And one of them was about the reputation that Ivan Reitman had on some of his earlier films, that he was known amongst one or two of the crew, it says in this article, as Ivan the Terrible. And as Reitman declares to premiere in this piece, Bill Murray says it stopped during the second Ghostbusters, but I think it stopped during the first. And in fact, on the set of Junior, the crew, it's acknowledged in the article that the crew were talking about how this particular production was so pleasant. It was also very, very, very fast. That filming began April the 4th. Filming was going to wrap up on June the 28th. There would not be a lot of post-production time on Junior. Not that it necessarily needed it, but this was a case of Schwarzenegger slotting a comedy into his schedule. He had a very small window, and part and parcel of it was, could Reitman have this in cinemas, 8 months after it started shooting, which he ultimately did. Now, there was still room in the shoot for bits of improvisation. In fact, the epilogue to the movie was shot on Malibu Beach. And again, as per that set report, it was mainly improvised as well. But it got to a point where Reitman had a cut by late summer of 1994 that test screenings could get underway on. And in fact, the screenings were taking place in September of that month. And off the back of that, a little bit of reshoot work had already been done at the end of the summer. And Reitman, again, he changed the epilogue. He changed a scene that took place in an operating theatre as well, and beefing up of a scene between Schwarzenegger and Thompson too. The test scores weren't going off the chart, but it was clear that the film was playing relatively well in cinemas. And so it was a case of, well, may as well get this one out there. The promotion began to ramp up, and Universal was going to release it November the 23rd, 1994, a nice big movie for really the Christmas and end of year season. Now, Kevin Wade and Chris Conrad would reflect that in the end the film did okay, I'm coming to that, but they felt that the marketing campaign was a little bit off. That they describe how the film was a total joy to make, but I was disappointed in the creative choices for the marketing campaign, that they felt the poster should have shown Arnold Schwarzenegger in drag, and it should have gone closer to the campaign that really sent Robin Williams in Mrs. Doubtfire into the absolute stratosphere. The critical response to the movie wasn't great at first. I mean, at heart, it's a single joke comedy, but they tried to put, and DeVito certainly taught this up, they tried to put a more solid story in the midst of it. Also, they got a good performance out of Arnold Schwarzenegger as well. In fact, Roger Ebert in particular was really, really praising of the work that Schwarzenegger put in the movie. He got nominated for Best Actor in a Motion Picture Musical or Comedy for the Golden Globe Awards, in fact, for his work. Emma Thompson also got nominated. I should acknowledge, of course, that the Golden Globe Awards are a load of rubbish, but still, it was headline grabbing in the 1990s, and it's not often you hear Schwarzenegger getting acting awards of that ilk, or certainly being in that kind of conversation. But could the film then repeat really the success of Twins when it got into cinemas? As much as the critical response was okay, the box office, well, it was also okay, really. That it opened over the Thanksgiving weekend, but there was competition here. That The Santa Claus, starring Tim Allen, had really just come out of nowhere for Disney, and on its third week of release, that had leapt up to number one. It took $20 million on its third week of release, upping its box office by nearly 20%. Star Trek Generations was in second place and doing quite well, thank you very much. Interview with the Vampire Chronicles, starring Tom Cruise, have been around for 3 weeks. Junior opened in fourth, less than $10 million, which for a Schwarzenegger movie was notable. Its weekend gross was $9.8 million, holding off the competition from A Low Down Dirty Shame, which also opened that same weekend, and The Pagemaster, which was the other big family movie that came out. But the Santa Claus's success was kind of holding the money, really, was taking the money away, in much the same way that Kindergarten Cop found itself up against Home Alone. Here, Junior found itself up against a lower raging success, but still a raging success. That notwithstanding, it's a family movie. It could have hung around, yet on its second weekend it lost nearly 50% of its business. It went up a place in the chart, but its second weekend gross was just $5 million, and this was clearly not going to be the kind of breakout hit that had been hoped for. As the Santa Claus continued to live in the top three, Junior just started dropping, and by the time it left US cinemas, it had grossed just $36 million. A real low point, really, for a Schwarzenegger film. Even appreciating it was a comedy, that was a massive, massive, massive disappointment. Now, where it wasn't a disappointment was outside of America, where Junior found more of an audience. In fact, going back to the writers, they talked about in Europe, they felt that men were less threatened and more accepting of the film, that the London premiere, they reported, saw men dressed as a pregnant woman, and the mayor of Austria, where Arnie grew up, gave them the key to the city as part of the premiere of it there. And so, outside of America, Junior found enough money to keep people content. It added about another 70 million. Overall box office 108.4 million for an expensive comedy, to be fair. It still cost 60 million to make, but they knew that this would be a decent video rental, as it turned out, and it just about made its way into profit. And as Schwarzenegger wrote himself in his book, he said, making money was never my only goal, but 1994 was the year after Last Action Hero had really damaged his box office luster a little bit, and he said, I always kept an eye on my earning power as a gauge of success, and money opened the door to interesting investments. True Lies and Junior were both hits in 1994, and that put my movie career back on track. Now, Junior, not a massive hit. It would dissuade him just for a little bit of doing comedy until he got to, just a couple of years later, Jingle All the Way. But of the comedy movies that Schwarzenegger made, this was the one that struggled the most to find an audience. It's also the one, I'd argue, where he's a little more out there and he does some of the best acting of his career. Who knew? It's available out there now if you want to watch it. If you like this podcast and don't mind supporting it, then there are there are three main ways you can do it. If you want to support it financially and help support the Film Stories project, head over to patreon.com/Simon Brew. If you put some coins in the pot there, you get the podcast early pretty much every week. You get it ad-free as well. You find out the gossip and basically what we're up to behind the scenes. Costing you absolutely nothing is to subscribe to this podcast at your podcast home of choice. Thank you to everybody who's done that. I know a lot of people have been doing that for me, and likewise leaving a review, ideally a hugely positive review, costs you nothing as well, but really helps independent podcasts such as this one. Again, thank you to everyone who's taken the time and trouble to do that. Also, Film Stories magazines are on sale. If you're looking for Christmas presents, if you're looking for festive gifts, if you're looking for something for you, I mean, they're out there now. If you go to store.filmstories.co.uk, you can find our 168-page UK's biggest film magazine, latest issue for sale. Also, we've got Film Junior too, the only print magazine in the UK for youngsters, for the only one talking about films for 7 to 14-year-olds. They're also writing it as well. We're paying them to write it, and so all sorts of stuff just wrapped into that project. Again, ideal Christmas gift subscriptions. If you go to webscribe.co.uk and look up Film Junior, you'll find all of our subscription deals there. Thank you to everyone who's been spreading the word. And that brings me to the end of this latest episode of Film Stories. As always, thank you so much for listening, and thank you for your time. If I've not bored you completely, you can find more from me just about still on Twitter at Simon Brew. I'm on Blue Sky at Simon Brew as well. Thank you to everyone who's found me there and said hello. The entire Film Stories project is at Film Stories. You'll find it on Twitter. You'll also find it on Facebook at facebook.com/filmstoriesonline. You'll find us on YouTube, youtube.com/Film Stories. You'll find us your Patreon again is patreon.com/Simon Brew, and then there's our website filmstories.co.uk, which we're now doing TV and gaming stuff as well, although not to the detriment of the films of the film material. There's loads going on that site. It's updated every weekday with a lot of stuff at the moment, so thank you again to everyone who's supporting us there. And then if you go to store.filmstories.co.uk, that is where you will find our new Blu-rays of No Way Out and Bull Durham. For the first time in the UK, our Blu-ray of Sneakers has sadly sold out. So I mean, I urge you to get in quick on these new ones as well. The main thing, as always, is that you all take care, you all look after yourselves, you all stay safe and well. I'm going to go off and watch another load of films in which I will bore you about in the near future. Until then, look after yourselves, take care. I will be back soon with another bunch of Film Stories. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.